trigger is a trigger. We all have triggers, and we each can choose to either react in the moment or recognize it before the survival self-defense mechanism kicks in to protect us, right? It's for protection reasons, for whatever experience we had in the past that had us react in such a way. And then instead walking away until you either cool down or even for those that freeze, right? So that in itself is like, in that moment, you might freeze and later recognizing, oh, I froze. Or those that flight, right? They just want to leave the situation. Might even hang up on people that are having that fight reaction, right? So you'll just get to see how it all plays together. It's like becomes a self-defense mechanism dance, right? An ego battle of the, I should say dance of the egos, I don't know, to make it a little lighter.
Welcome to the Life is a Healing Journey podcast by yours truly, Anuschka, with a C. This podcast explores how you can create a true healthy lifestyle and live your life to the fullest in the face of any circumstance by healing and balancing your mind, body, spirit. If you are someone that's been dealing with disharmony in any area of your life and you are committed to seeking harmony, this podcast is for you. Let's start healing.
Today's podcast is focused on the mind piece of mind, body, spirit. We all have stories, triggers, and patterns that run our life. And with them, self-defense mechanisms to protect us from getting hurt. Some may stay silent and suffer through the triggers where they freeze, completely shutting down. And really, some are even unable to move in those cases. They might even make themselves sick subconsciously just so they can be a hermit until they snap out of it, consciously taking that action. And then there are others that run away. They quit. They just flight. They might even get this last minute flight to somewhere just to go on vacation and run away from all their problems. Or even worse, might even move to another city or state or country even, not realizing they are taking themselves with them. So the misery continues and follows them. Running away never works, as much as we like to think that, because we're always going to take this right here, this person, our own selves with us. And then, of course, there's the fight, that those that say whatever comes out of their mouths. They have outbursts, not remembering half of what they said later, sometimes even, right? Just that fight mode, fight, flight, freeze, right? I am guilty at times, although I've become a lot more compassionate with the words that do come out of my mouth. And I tend to say it with a little laugh just to try to lighten things up. Although there are times where the outbursts happen and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know why that came out. It was just something that literally is not even a conscious outburst. That's why it's called an outburst, right? It's just something all of a sudden comes out of my mouth. And thankfully, I don't come across as that bitch anymore, like a total bitch, because I used to not laugh, or I used to come across a lot more intense. So I've done a lot of work around that and watching on catching myself before it gets to that point and having a conscious conversation instead, right? Of course, it all takes work. Still, when I really get triggered, that tends to happen. Life is a healing journey. With fight, now there's also those that might go on to an extreme level where they throw things, punch the walls. Again, done that once a couple times maybe in my life. Not a good look. Definitely hurt my knuckle more than the wall. Unfortunately, there are those that even will have that defense mechanism of fight and they abuse their significant other, or even worse, might even take a weapon out and do damage beyond repair. And all of this is from an automatic reaction where they see red, literally red, nothing else. And again, some might not even remember later. And I've had those conversations. I'm like, well, you said this. And it's like, no, I didn't. And it's literally like, yes, I've recorded it even. And I said, like, see, this is what happened. And they don't even remember. So just be aware that these are just self-defense mechanisms that happen, whether it's the fight, flight, or freeze. And I know I've talked about this in previous episodes, and it's just so essential just to know what yours is. Until then, you have more consciousness and you can completely begin to recognize these triggers before they go full on survival mode when you get triggered and that automatic self-defense kicks in, right? Because a trigger is a trigger. We all have triggers, and we each can choose to either react in the moment or recognize it before the survival self-defense mechanism kicks in to protect us, right? It's for protection reasons, for whatever experience we had in the past that had us react in such a way. And then instead walking away until you either cool down or even for those that like that freeze, right? So that in itself is like in that moment, you might freeze and later recognizing, oh, I froze. Or those that flight, right? They just want to leave the situation, might even hang up on people that are having that fight reaction, right? So you'll just get to see how it all plays together. It's like becomes a self-defense mechanism dance, right? An ego battle of the, I should say dance of the egos, I don't know, to make it a little lighter. Really essential again to recognize yours and those around you, your loved ones, right? And really tuning into what is their automatic and what's their secondary, right? Until they actually can get to that place of calming down, consciousness, coming from a conscious place rather than that inner wounded child, and connecting to your higher self again. And then at that moment, having those conscious conversations when you're not triggered, right? Because again, triggers are within all of us, and you can look at it as an opportunity for growth and healing when you shift your context around it. We all have had some certain experience that has been traumatic at some point in our life. Now, you may say, not really, but you may also not realize that as a child, if someone even took away your favorite toy or eraser as a child, that can create a traumatic feeling, a traumatic reaction, because it's like, oh my God, my favorite eraser. I literally have had a client that happened to. I'm not just making this up, where she remembers one of her classmates took away her favorite eraser. And because of that, she was always afraid of people taking away what's hers. And she just stopped trusting people, right? I mean, little tiny things, and look at what happens, right? And the thing is these traumatic events, it causes the brain to have this, like ingrains a sensory stimuli into memory. And when that happens, that's when the person, when they encounter something similar to that stimuli, it can be a completely different context. Yet when it's something even remotely similar, that trigger becomes associated with the trauma from the past experience. And bam, reaction happens. In some cases, a sensory trigger can even cause an emotional reaction. Right? And some of this may look like PTSD, and those that have it may not even have the awareness. And before they actually realize that they are all of a sudden upset and they have no idea why. Right? And that's where, again, life is a healing journey. So it's really discovering and getting curious about all your triggers and looking at them as an opportunity or a gift to really grow through it. Right? Because when you have a trigger, that means there's something within you that hasn't been healed. And this in itself can disrupt your higher consciousness, right? And you can completely jump out of consciousness until you disrupt the trigger. And you do that by creating higher consciousness, right? So it's interesting how there's like consciousness all involved right here in having awareness. And of course, practice, making this a practice, not like you're going to change overnight. All of a sudden you're going to go from flight to, oh, I'm going to stick around and not flight and just walk away, right? Or fight, just suddenly, just like I said, I've been working with with these things on myself for, I don't know, a decade, and I still have the outbursts at times, much calmer. Yeah, it does happen. And I take responsibility as soon as it does, because that's That's the next step too, right? And as we have these experiences, if you get to that point of disrupting it before that explosion mode happens, right, whatever that looks like, then in that case, you can actually really start changing those limiting beliefs and triggers. And what's even worse is when you have these types of different limiting beliefs and triggers, you tend to attract different scenarios into your life that bring out that same trigger until you choose to use that trigger to guide you and heal that layer, right? Again, looking at it as a gift and healing one layer at a time. Your triggers reveal what still lives within you and what hasn't been healed. For instance, the story of, because there's stories that we all create too, right? The story of my voice doesn't matter may create more instances and attract people that make you feel that exact thing, where that your voice doesn't matter, that you feel unheard, right? So that in itself, you're going to attract different instances and situations and experiences that will continue to have you prove this story, because we're always proving the story that we believe in the subconscious mind. And by running away from such experiences will also make no difference, because again, you continue to live with you. So you're not going to actually heal unless you look at really the trigger itself and really creating that awareness and healing it. Otherwise, again, you're going to attract these same circumstances with different types of scenarios and people and reliving that same pattern in life. And when you look into your life and really see what triggers you, you'll notice the patterns. You'll notice them. Might be different instances, different people, completely different situation, still similar pattern, and the root of it becomes the similar trigger. Of course, there are multiple triggers. It's not just one trigger, right? We all have had various experiences in life, mainly childhood, but also adulthood, right? For instance, someone's significant other has an affair, that can create a whole new story in adulthood, right? A lot of times, most likely, it's something to do with the subconscious belief that already existed that created such a scenario. And it's just for you to recognize that. Because look, we all are human. And so we all have memories. And triggers may not go away 100% either. You can actually do a lot of work to really bring awareness to them, though, and disrupt them again before the reaction, right? Act before reacting and heal that layer on a subconscious level, which I've noticed with mine, there are definitely triggers of mine that I do feel like I have completely healed through time and through psyche, because I gotten to the root of it, right? Because that is the biggest thing, is getting to the root of what it is. You might think it's one incident, and then it's like, oh, when that one's gone, it's like, oh, but if it's still there, maybe it was another situation that you just don't even remember, right? So healing journey, that's it. Anytime you have an internal reaction with something that has happened that takes you out of harmony and creates disharmony in your body, there's a trigger, even if it's something small. And if you continue to suppress or repress it, the balloon that's going to keep blowing up, and eventually some version of explosion will happen, right? So it's really, again, having that awareness, getting curious, right? Like, what is it that took me out of disharmony, and unfolding it. Awareness is key. And as I said, taking responsibility for each trigger you have is going to make the difference, rather than blaming others and trying to change them. Because if you're getting triggered, now, of course, there are certain situations where, like for instance, an abusive situation or something like that, obviously, then you're going to get triggered. I mean, maybe you won't, but for the most part, you're going to get upset or angry or something, right? And that, I'm not saying that, you don't blame yourself. That's not this at all, right? This is more recognizing these triggers and taking responsibility of what lives within you without accepting or saying, oh, what that other person did is okay. More so, what is it here within you that might have attracted such a situation if it's happening like repetitively, right? So that's really what it comes down to. And when you do that, then also like you can really look at, okay, in relationships, again, humans, right? That other person that you are having whatever conflict with or chip with, that person also that's triggering you has triggers too. Most likely, many times similar to yours. Or it could be actually the exact opposite, where it makes it difficult to understand one another even more so. And that's when I say, there's your master teacher, right? When you have those master teachers in life, they're really shining light on all the triggers that still are within you to be healed. And when you get curious to what's underneath the trigger and start unfolding these different layers and where it came from and what specifically triggered you to begin with, that's when the change and transformation can happen for you. And what are you making what happened? That's really what it comes down to. Is like, the question is, what are you making what actually happened mean about you yourself? What is it that you're making it mean? What's the interpretation? We always have these stories that we create that are interpreted from what actually happened. Like, instead of looking at the facts, right? What a fly on the wall would see. So if there's a fly on the wall and only seeing what actually happened without any interpretation, and then you can begin to distinguish your interpretation of what actually happened in the story that you create from it, right? This, like, for me personally, I've shared this story before, and I will share it always because this was one of my biggest triggers when my fifth grade teacher, for instance, when I was like, always curious and asking questions, when my fifth grade teacher came up to me and says, oh my God, Anuschka, how'd you make it to the fifth grade, right? So it's like, what are the facts? The facts are I raised my hand. The facts are there was kids sitting around my table. The fact is the teacher said, oh my God, Anuschka, how'd you make it to the fifth grade? And the fact is the other kids around me started laughing, right? That's what a fly on the wall would see. What I made it mean was a whole nother story, right? I made it mean I must prove that I'm smart, that I must be stupid. I was completely mortified that all the kids were laughing, that, oh my God, I must be so dumb that all these kids are laughing at me. Like, all these stories that came from it, right? Not to say that was an ideal situation, nor was it okay for the teacher to do that. And again, that created a whole new path for me. It completely changed me as a person. Like, I shut down, I stopped raising my hand. I had to figure things out all on my own for years until I discovered the story. But you really then can see, okay, what actually happened? What did I make it mean? And completely separate out the two. And then see what stories that you've been living and what you continue to attract based on those stories. How many times have I experienced that same scenario in different ways, right? Multiple times. So that just shows you, it's like, it keeps coming into your face to be like, hello, I need healing. Hello, I need healing, right? And sometimes, most times, when you don't do the work, it gets louder and more intense and louder and more intense until you're finally like, oh my gosh, no more. I can't deal with this, because it's not who you are. It's your limiting belief. And that's that. And actually, and this is in 2015. This is when I really discovered so many other limiting beliefs and triggers. Again, this is the biggest one. But that in itself, when I started Landmark Worldwide, is when I learned about all these stories and uncollapsing what happened, the facts of what happened with actually like the stories we create. And I realized, wow, like there's so many different limiting beliefs and triggers that I had. And I began to recognize how I would react so defensively, even if someone was just joking with me, all rooted from this experience I had in fifth grade, all of it. And thankfully that trigger has really gone away, and I feel like I've healed it. And it doesn't, of course, there's other triggers, but it doesn't mean that it's all gone, right? There's other triggers or different versions of it, but nothing to that extent. I'm constantly working on myself. I believe everyone needs to do that for themselves and would benefit from it to heal those next layers. And, even recently, a couple new layers have recently surfaced, and I'm becoming more and more aware of them, disrupting the reaction from that self-defense mechanism of fight, right? And then, of course, using Psyche to reprogram my subconscious mind. Once I start unfolding and really getting to the root of what it is underneath the trigger, and getting me to that place of peace and non-attachment, so I can heal that trigger for good. So again, it's so important to discover your own self-defense mechanisms. And that's really one of the first exercises that I have my clients work on, is really discovering what their self-defense mechanism is, as well as their secondary, not just auto, their secondary. Like my secondary is I go into flight, like F this, I'm done. And I start going through all these scenarios of how this relationship is over and how there's no way that I'm going to continue being with it, in this relationship, with whether romantic or a friendship, it doesn't matter. But this is like where I go to. And then I catch myself and I start laughing because it's like really, like I just went to flight mode just now. And like I said, this is one of the first exercises I will have my clients work on for themselves and for the ones in their life, to really recognize the different self-defense mechanisms each person has, because it's important to know these kinds of things. Triggers, stories, and patterns, they take away your peace of mind and they lower your vibe. That's why it's essential to discover yours and really begin to see what your automatic self-defense mechanism is when you do get triggered. And just, you can do that by just thinking about the last few times that you've gotten triggered recently. Were you in fight mode? Like, this is the auto, right? Were you in fight mode? Like, were you saying things in like an attacking kind of way and you just couldn't keep your mouth shut? Like me? Or do you flight where you're just like, I'm done, and you want to just run away and just hang up or whatever? Or did you go on freeze mode where you just literally feel like you can't like move, you shut down and you're like suffering, right? So flight, you quit, freeze, shut down, suffer, right? And again, look at what your secondary one is too, because you get to that place and you start recognizing it and you can start laughing at it like I do, right? Like, it's so interesting. I don't do this anymore because I've like caught myself, but when I used to go into my secondary flight mode, when I would get into like a little tiff with Ashkan, like I literally would be like, we just need to get a divorce, and like all these crazy thoughts, like what is that going to look like? And then now, like, I don't even go there. Like the couple times that it comes up, I just laugh at it. I'm like, oh, look at that ego trying to protect me, right? It's just ego wanting to protect you from getting hurt. That's what it comes down to. And those that go into freeze mode, they might just spiral in their thoughts and like suffer, right? And when you catch yourself, then you're able to just say, okay, what can I do to get out of this? Like having things already jotted down for yourself to say, what can you do to jump out of this freeze mode and take an action of some kind? And maybe that looks like journaling, right? Is like just sitting, and same with flight, right? Getting yourself out of it by journaling to really uncollapse of like, okay, what are the facts of what happened and what are your interpretations of it? Or it could look like venting to someone to really distinguish between the two. Because if you're like me and you're an extrovert, venting to someone and talking out loud about it has me process it a lot faster than writing it down. That's just how my brain works. And then all of a sudden I have new awarenesses that come up about, and it's like, oh, okay, I see what just happened. I see what I made it mean. Or sometimes I, look at it as like, well, that person did something that upset me. So guess what? You go and have a conscious conversation with them. That's what it would look like. And really coming from that place of, you can still express how you feel by what another person did, right? And this will be a whole nother episode of its own, because conscious conversations is essential for relationships. This self-defense mechanism awareness alone can open up your eyes to heal the triggers in your life, to really begin to view triggers as opportunities for growth and healing, and seeing them as gifts. Okay, so when you're more hormonal or emotional, you might get triggered more. And so start viewing that as a way of really looking at it as okay, so now this is showing me something else that there is to be healed, rather than getting all frustrated and emotional and wanting to go through the self-defense mechanism, right? So start changing your perception around things, and you'll be surprised the difference it will make in your life. Of course, as always, if you get stuck and you really are not able to move forward from there, I'm only a click away. And of course, for our practice area to integrate into your life and really to get to know yourself, start making a list of what gets under your skin or pushes your buttons. What are your triggers? What triggers you? What's your self-defense mechanism? Right? The automatic one. Do you attack, like fight, right? Quit and you just flight, I'm out, or suffer and freeze and shut down? Do you victimize yourself and act as if life is happening to you rather than taking responsibility for your life and seeking how life is happening for you? Begin recognizing your triggers and add them to a triggers list to master you by noticing each trigger, disrupting them, and creating new habits. And write these different habits down, because that's also something when you're in trigger mode or low vibe ego mode, you're not going to know what action to take. So create that list when you're conscious and connected to your higher self. So all you need to do is look at the list and then take the action. And so, for instance, with me, a couple of mine that I've transformed over the years is this whole people making fun of me or jokingly calling me stupid, or, in a joking way that used to literally, I would feel my blood boiling, right, and was ready to strangle someone. To now, I'm so clear that it was just a story because of my fifth grade version of me, right, that I created. So I just laugh with them for the most part. Sometimes I might get a little direct and say, hey, that's not okay, that's disrespectful, but I do it in a very mature, conscious way. And so now it's just a matter of doing that with other things, right? For instance, another one of mine is when people don't keep their word or flake on me, right? So before I used to just cut them out. I was I'm done. I'm not, if they happen more than once or twice, I'm done, cut off, right? Whereas now I just accept people as they are, and I might not take them as seriously, or I might take them from my inner circle to outer circle or even further out, and just accept them as they are. Just accept and expect them to be this way so I don't personally get disappointed, right? So these are just some of mine. See what yours are, and subscribe to not miss next week's episode, Focus on the Body.
Thank you for listening to Life is a Healing Journey podcast. You are here to peel and heal one layer at a time, to live your life to the fullest in the face of any circumstance, while embracing a life filled with love, joy, and peace. If you are in disharmony in any area of your life and truly desire to be in harmony and committed to elevating your health and well-being, I'm one click away. Find me at healingwithanuschka.com. And remember, that's Anuschka with a C. And if you like what you heard, please subscribe and share this podcast with your loved ones. Get your healing on. Until next time.